Hello, my friends, and all you caffeinated creeps out there, and welcome to the world of the creepy and the caffeinated, of conspiracies and coffee. Welcome to Tales from the Dark Roast. Have you ever had a dream, Neo, that you were so sure was real? What if you were unable to wake from that dream? How would you know the difference between the dream world and the real world? Morpheus from the Matrix. Unlike other forms of psychological disorders, the core issue in trauma is reality. Bessel A. van der Kolk, Traumatic Stress, the Effects of Overwhelming Experience on Mind, Body, and Society. Reality and trauma. Reality being the world around us and the stimuli we experience, how we perceive our lives day in and day out. Trauma, an emotional response to a deeply disturbing and sometimes life-altering event. One of these seems to be a straightforward experience. You open your eyes and you see your bedroom, or you smell freshly brewed coffee as you pass a cafe. Everything you see, hear, touch, taste, and more help to shape your individual reality. But what if there was something that didn't quite seem right in your reality? What if there was an experience in your past that resulted in your reality taking a shift at times? Something that causes the world you are living in to feel off, like it is not the one you were born to. Taking it a step further, what if you could pinpoint the exact moment when these shifts in reality began to take place? Not only could you pinpoint it, but it was linked back to a traumatic experience that nearly took your life. The human mind is a strange and enigmatic thing, and how it processes both reality and trauma are still being defined and understood. Keep this in mind as we talk with today's guest about a deeply personal experience he had and how it's left him at times feeling as if he was in dual realities. Welcome to the Dark Roast, an old and very dear friend, Mr. Chris Casillas. Chris, thanks for joining us, man.
Thanks so much for having me. It's so good to talk to you. It's been a time.
It has been. I think we determined it's been since probably around 2006 since we actually saw each other in person.
Yeah. I know we chat pretty regularly, but yeah, we haven't actually seen each other in person since like '06.
Yeah, so it's been a while, and it was kind of in between here and there that your experience happened. And before we get into it, though, got to talk coffee. Got to pay the price to the Java gods. What are you drinking? Anything at all, or?
Oh yeah, I have in my favorite resting witch face tumbler here. Um, it's a Texas pecan flavor.
Mhm.
It's trying something a little bit new. Usually I just daily just drink whatever gets me going for the day. But thought I'd try something special. It's a Texas pecan, but I added a dash of a caramel iced coffee in as well. So it's a little bit of a sweetness, but it's yeah I'm real weird that way. I can only drink my coffee cold. I yeah, it's weird.
Maybe it's an acid thing, because I think one of my other guests, Inika, when she was on, she
Mhm.
had talked about she can't do hot coffee really that much because of the acidity, but cold coffee she's fine with. So
I did for a while actually. I wasn't really a coffee drinker for a long time. It wasn't until my wife and I started dating, and she drinks it all the time, and I was like, yeah, I'll give it a try, and I would drink it hot then, but then I think it was I'm always hot. I always feel hot. And so drinking something warm just makes me feel even more warm. And I'm like, I can't. So it also ensures that nobody's going to drink my coffee because no one else in the house drinks it cold.
cold,
So
yeah.
yeah. So I'm like, this is mine. You have yours
Nice.
and I'll have mine.
What brand is it? Do you know?
I believe it's a store brand. It's a local
Okay.
grocery store brand. Yeah, every once in a while they'll have something kind of interesting, and I was like, yeah, this looks pretty good. There have been a couple of flavors that I've seen out there, brands. There's one, I believe it is called, I think I wrote it down, it's called Catfight Coffee. There's a guitar player, a musician that I follow on social media that's done some like backing guitar work for the Misfits and like several other bands, and he started posting about coffee, and it's somewhere up in Jersey. I believe they say it's in the shadow of Gotham is where they brew it, and it's called Catfight Coffee, and he's usually posting a lot of different things about it. And I've been meaning to order it. I just hadn't gotten around to it, but I was like, yeah, I'll give that a try. So I'll have to let you know how that is.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm gonna write that one down because I'm always looking for new fun coffees. So
Yeah.
it's funny that you're drinking one that's kind of sweet, because I decided I was going to get some flavored coffee while I was at the store this morning, and I ended up getting I think it's Community Coffee is the name of the brand, and it's a vanilla waffle cone.
That
And
sounds really good.
it's, so far it is. I put a little bit of my wife's caramel creamer in it, and so it's very sweet and creamy
Mhm.
with the creamer in it, obviously. But it really does taste like waffle cone and vanilla. Not like I'm eating them, but like I've got like the remains of the flavor.
Yeah,
So
that's yeah.
which is the way I like it. So
Yeah, that's great. That
hmm,
sounds really good. I usually go for the sweeter stuff.
I'm all over the place. I do like the sweet stuff, but I can drink just straight black, like tar coffee off the bottom of the pot. So
I sometimes I wish I could, just because it goes with my look. Everything I wear is black. My entire office that I'm in here now is all painted black, but I can't. I've tried, and I can't do it.
it's not for everyone. I will say that
Yeah.
it's not for everyone. So all right, tribute paid. Let's get into the meat and potatoes of it. I guess let's start by telling, I guess, the experience that you had that resulted in the trauma that led to the feelings that you're starting to have.
Yeah. So I'll preface, for anyone who is a little squeamish just with, injuries, blood, and that sort of thing, just fair warning. Um, yeah. So back in November of 2017, I worked just a couple miles from my house, and pretty regularly I would go home on my lunch breaks because it was super close, and I could go, let the dog out, check on the cats, check the mail, what have you. And it was one of those normal sorts of things. It was afternoon. I went home. My wife's birthday was actually coming up about 4 days later, and I had a couple of packages that were delivered. And I was like, I'm gonna go home, get these in the house, put them somewhere where she won't see them. Did my normal thing, and it was like, okay, time to head back to work. For anybody who either has been or lives in Texas, we get two seasons. We get scorching hot and not quite so hot. And it was November, and it was still pretty warm. You'd start sweating if you stood outside longer than 10-15 minutes. And but the office that I worked in was an ice box, which I usually enjoy, but because I'm typing and doing things with my hands, I like to keep them warm so I'm not shaking. And I had these arm warmers on that is very goth. It completely went with my look, but they were functional. And so I had those on, but I was like t-shirt and jeans, my boots, just my usual creepy self. And I got in the car and headed back to work. Small detour from this, because it's a weird sort of a thing. Just less than a year prior, so right now we're talking November of 2017, but in December of 2016, this exact same thing was happening. I went home on a lunch break, was heading back to work. It was a kind of a busy intersection. At the time, I drove a Chevy S10, so it's a small, very small truck, and I was
very small. I had one as well. They're
yeah
nice little trucks, but they are tiny.
Yeah, it was very, very small. I mean, it did have like the extended cab with like the the seat that folded down, but it was a great little truck. I loved it. And I was sitting at very busy intersection. It's four lane, two going, two coming. And I was at the light, it was a red light. The light turned green. I waited just a second. And as I started to go through the light, I hadn't made it across the first two lanes and the entire truck shifted. I had gotten hit and was pretty much facing in the direction I had just come from. And there was a guy who was trying to make the red light, probably going, 40 something miles an hour in a Dodge Ram, which is like 4 of what my truck was, and completely totaled my truck. This also happened to be exactly a week before my wife and I were getting married. A week later, we were heading to Salem up in Massachusetts for our wedding. And so I'm like, this is the last thing I need to deal with, is having now totaled my truck. I wasn't hurt, thankfully. My head hit the driver's side window. Not hard, it didn't break, but it was enough to kind of, rattle my brains a little bit.
Give you a good jolt.
Yeah, exactly. It was just, the way he hit me, my truck went to the right, but my body wanted to go left. And yeah, it kind of knocked me around just a little bit, but I was able to get out. And he was a little further down because when he hit me, he had actually spun around, I believe twice, if I remember. He spun around, 2 full turns and then was facing the direction that he had just come from. And, of course it was his fault. Luckily, I lived really close by. The tow truck came, loaded up my truck, dropped me off at the house, took my truck away. I called my wife to tell her, hey, I'm fine, but this is what happened. So of course she came home and immediately it was like, you have to go to the ER. Just have them check you out. And I was like, I'm fine. She was like, no, really, the adrenaline is still going. You feel fine. You probably won't soon. And I was like, okay. So the emergency room literally was like a mile down the road. So she took me, they checked me out and sent me on my way. I was like, okay, other than some soreness, feeling like I had just completed a pretty strenuous workout, I was okay.
So just some minor whiplash, but the truck
exactly.
was totaled.
Yeah, truck was absolutely totaled. And it was funny because the truck was, it was older, and it had a few things happening here and there that were already broken prior to the accident, but they just lumped it all in because they were like, we can't tell, which was fine. And, that was it. I guess about 3 or 4 days later, we boarded the plane and, we went to Salem. It was utterly freezing, but the hospital had sent me with, some muscle relaxers. So I was all right. And, once we got back, I was like, okay, it's time to shop for a new car. And I'm one of those people, I don't like to waste a lot of time if I'm looking for something or wanting to make a big purchase. I going into it, I kind of know, what I want. And the first car that I saw was at a dealership, and it was a 2007 Mazda 3 hatchback. 4 doors. I love hatchbacks for whatever reason. And the cool thing was it was purple. It was just in this kind of cool shade of purple. And I was like, that's the one. And I mean, in just a few days, I bought it. So that was my car. I have a tendency to nickname my vehicles, and this one, because of the purple, I named it the Phantom. I'm a big comic book nerd, and so I remembered the Phantom. There was a really bad movie, I think, with Billy Zane.
It was fun though. Yeah, it was Billy Zane, but it was fun. It was. Really
it was, but it was. I enjoyed the character. I remember from Flash Gordon. My dad got me into Flash Gordon as a kid. Phantom was there, but anyway, it was a purple shade, and I was like, it's the Phantom. It's a cool name. It's my purple car, and it's great. Well, was looking for some touch-up paint actually for a tiny ding on it, and when I was trying to find it, as it turns out, which I didn't know at the time, the factory color that Mazda used for this was called Phantom Purple. I think they had a Phantom Blue as well, but it was Phantom Purple. And I was like, well, look at that, and it, of course, later on, I found like, yeah, it's a super appropriate name for that car, but that was it. That was my Phantom. I loved it. So going back to November of 2017, so I'd only had this car since the January.
So 10 months, give or take.
10 months. Yeah. 10 months. I had just maybe a month prior, I had just redone my brakes. And a couple weeks before that, I had wound up having to have a new clutch put in. It was running great. And so I'm on my way back to work, and there's really only kind of one major way to go from where our house was at the time to my office. The most direct way. Every other way, you'd have to like get on a highway, and it's just very convoluted. So, like I said, it was just, I think, 2.25 miles, if I remember correctly. I used to bike on occasion to work, and I'm about halfway there, and it's the road is it's very hilly. It kind of winds a little bit, lots of hills, which murdered me on a bike. And I'm going up. Yeah, it was a great workout, but I rarely, when I did ride my bike, I rarely could make it up that hill like in one go. But so mind you, I'm going uphill at this point, and I had just shifted. My car was a stick shift. I had just shifted. The road kind of winds around just a little bit. I mean, not enough that you have no visibility, just enough. And I was also passing an apartment complex that my wife and I had lived in the prior year. I was like right in front of it, and I looked down for just a second. This particular road is a 2 lanes southbound, 2 lanes northbound, and then the median. And I looked down for just a second, probably to fidget with the AC or something. I had my music on, and just as I look back up from the AC and look ahead, all I can see is this cloud of dirt and dust and bits of metal and debris just charging at me. I couldn't see initially what it was because there was just so much dust and everything. But as it got closer, I realized it was a truck, also a Dodge Ram. I have terrible luck with Dodge Rams, apparently. But so I look up, and that's what I see, and it's barreling at me. And I was in, so I'm in I guess I was going southbound, and I was of the 2 lanes, I was in the furthest right lane. So had I tried to turn off the road, if I went to my right, I would have basically hopped the sidewalk and hit the big like iron perimeter fence of the apartment complex.
The one you and your wife had lived in.
Yeah.
Okay.
I said I knew the area. I knew kind of what was in that stretch, and I was like, well, if I, of course, this is all happening in the span of like 5 seconds, and I'm like, I can't go there. But as I kind of looked, out of my peripheral on the left, there was a car that wasn't level with me. It was just a little ways back, but I could barely see the front of it. And I was like, well, I can't go that way because
you would hit it and cut it off.
I'm going to hit them and potentially run them into oncoming traffic, or into the median. And at that point, I'm like, all I can do is hit my brakes and hit them as hard as I can. Thankful that I had just redone them like a couple weeks prior. And so that's what I did. I hit my brakes with every bit of energy that I could muster from my legs and just hoped for the best. Obviously, I was hit pretty hard because, mind you, as I'm going uphill, the vehicle that hit me was going downhill. And
were they coming into oncoming traffic, or Did like his brakes give
Yeah.
and he was going backwards, or?
So I'll get to that part of it because it is weird, a little weird, but nobody knew at the time. It was, it was just one of those, like, suddenly this vehicle's barreling towards me. There's metal and dirt and things flying all over the place, and so I hit my brakes, hoping that would do something. And of course, he hit me pretty well head on. My front windshield just exploded. Glass went everywhere. My airbag deployed, and I still kind of laugh at this, but when it deployed, I guess whatever the material was, it was pink. The airbag was, this sort of pale pink color, and not really realizing it at the time. I just remember it kind of exploding in front of me. And I remember having this thought in the back of my head, I hope that's not my face. I was worried that it was like, the skin on my face or something just like being ripped off. Or like, I didn't know. It was just this pink thing flying in front of me, glass everywhere. And like, once the explosion part of the impact was over, like sitting there, and there's glass everywhere, there's smoke everywhere. I know where I am, and I know obviously that I've been hit. I never blacked out, I never passed out or anything like that. But it's like you're sitting there going, well, what now? What do I do? Did the guy that hit me, is he dead? Is he hurt? Does he know what happened? What about the people behind me?
Yeah. Are they going to have enough time to stop so that you're not getting stuck in the middle? Like,
exactly. Yeah. I was just like, I don't, what do I do? And I kind of sat there for a second, and I looked, and my phone was still in the console where I had put it. I had my auxiliary cord hooked up to it. It was, had been playing prior. And so I was like, oh, my phone, I guess I should call 911. So I reach, instinctively, I'm reaching for it. And as I'm doing that, I kind of look down, and my right arm was a shape that it shouldn't have been. It was clearly broken, which, up until this point, the worst I think I'd ever done was broken a toe, which, I mean, in comparison is nothing. But it was like my arm shouldn't be shaped like that. There was no like rigidity to it or anything. The like saving grace.
Does it say like that scene in Harry Potter where
yes,
he breaks his arm and
it's just that is exactly what it looked like. And the thing that I guess then and in hindsight that I was grateful for was those damn goth arm warmers, because I couldn't actually see underneath and what had happened. I knew what it felt like, and I knew that it shouldn't be shaped that way, and that it was broken, but I couldn't actually see like just how bad it was. Were
you bleeding?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
It was, like I mentioned earlier, it was hot. And so, my hair is, anybody who knows me, my hair is really long. And so my hair is kind of stuck to my face in places with sweat. I thought maybe blood, I wasn't sure. My hands, knuckles were, I was hit probably between 40 and 50 miles an hour, I think is what they ultimately determined.
If you don't mind, I will actually, you sent me that one picture of the crash.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't mind,
yeah.
I'll put that up so people can actually see the crash,
yeah,
like what you're
absolutely.
talking about.
Yeah.
So these determined 40 to 50 miles an hour.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was, that was kind of the estimate, that I found out later once I got like the crash report and everything. But, the force of the explosion ultimately like kind of sandblasted my hands and my forearms. I had glass everywhere. There was blood. I was kind of cut up, and arm warmers did kind of deflect a little bit of it to keep them from probably being worse. But I'm reaching for my phone, and then of course, like the jolt of pain kind of kicks in, and I'm like, nope, I can't move it. And so the first thing that I did was I reached up. This was my right hand, and I was shifting when this happened. So I think that was part of why my arm was broken, because I had been shifting during the impact. And I reached up with my right hand and held onto my left shoulder, and then with my left hand I just held my elbow. So I just kept it like that, just holding it so that it didn't move, because as I tried to move my arm, I could feel the break of the bones, and I could feel where they were no longer connected, but now what I assume was like overlapping. So
it's
yeah,
if you've never had a really serious break, it's really weird, because you do feel, if you mess with it, you can feel that grinding and you can feel those bones. I broke my leg skateboarding like that years ago, and yeah, you can feel it. It's nasty.
And it's so strange, because even when with the adrenaline, and you're not screaming and writhing in pain, but just the feeling and almost the vibration of it through your body, and you can feel it and almost kind of hear it. It just makes you feel so sick. I was just like, okay, well, I'm going to do this. I'm going to hold this because I can't do anything else. And within like a few seconds, one of the drivers from the vehicle, I believe that was behind me, came up, and she stuck her head in the window to like check on me, because obviously all my windows had blown out.
Yeah.
And she was like, "Are you okay?" And I said, my arm is broken, but I think other than that, I'm okay. She said, "Okay, hang on. We've called the paramedics. They're on the way." Probably another 10-15 seconds later, another person came up to my car and was like, "Can you shut your car off?" And I was like, my arm's broken. I can't move it. He was like, "Okay." So he tried to reach in through the driver's window to shut it off, and he couldn't, because the dash had basically wrapped around, sort of creating like a nice little barrier to the ignition. He couldn't reach in to shut it off. He wound up having to go around to the passenger side, putting his foot up on the frame and like prying the passenger door open enough to get in and kind of wiggle it enough that it would turn the ignition off. And he basically was like, "Do you remember what happened?" And I said, I don't know. The guy just hit me head on. That's all I know." And he was like, "Well, I saw him, I was driving behind him, a little ways before it happened, and he was, driving erratically and kind of all over the place. I don't know if he was drunk or I don't know, but but I saw it. I'll let the police know." He was very helpful, but was also very like, "I was there."
Yeah.
And so it was like, at that point, all I could do was just sit there and wait until and at this, I still had no idea how many cars were involved. I didn't know anything.
Yeah.
And so finally, I believe it was a fire, one of the fire stations just up the road. And so one of the paramedics came up, and he was like, we've got an ambulance on the way. The driver that hit you is not responsive, so they're going to take him first. Yours should be here, within 10 minutes or so.
Right.
And not knowing really how that sort of thing worked, I just was like, God, that feels like a really long time, but whatever. Okay, fine.
Yeah.
And so I just kind of sat there, and some of the adrenaline's wearing off, and I'm just like,
You're starting to feel the pain more.
starting, yeah, just like starting to feel it, and this, the sort of, panic is like setting in, and you're like, you know, suddenly like the most ridiculous thoughts, like, oh, I have to call work and tell them I'm not coming back. Um, I had actually started like a part-time night job, for a little while. I was like, I'm gonna have to call them and tell them I can't. Like, it's just the dumbest housekeeping, type list of things in your head that you're just,
Going
anything
through.
to like not focus on, what just happened. And about that time, the paramedics came, and they opened my door and said, can you stand? And I was like, I'm not sure, maybe. Let me see. And they helped me kind of pivot, and I put my feet on the ground, but where the accident had occurred was kind of at the it was an incline, and so I couldn't really get my bearings to like stand up, and I clearly couldn't use my arm to help myself. And they were like, it's okay, we'll get you. And so they hoisted me up by my belt loops and spun me around and put me on the stretcher and loaded me into the ambulance. And they gave me my phone. They're like, is this your phone? It's like, yeah, it's my phone. They're like, okay, put me in the ambulance. And where they were like, is there someone that you can call? And I said, yes, I need to call my wife. And they're like, okay. And so they're driving me away to the hospital. Now, the hospital that I had gone to prior, the year prior, after my truck was totaled, was around the corner. And I assumed that's where we were going. So I asked them, and they were like, no, we have to take you to, certain hospital downtown, because they have a dedicated trauma unit, and that's where you need to be. And I was like, it's just my arm. And they were like, you
think it's your arm, but
you think it's your arm, and sure, but you just, that's where we're going. And I was like, okay, you know best. So they have me in there, and one of the paramedics, as I found out, was a trainee. She was like a student in her like training program through school, and so she gets this, and she's trying to like administer mild pain medication, and I'm just like, I don't know what to do. And the senior paramedic there was like, can I help you? Call anybody? And I was like, yes. And so I kind of nudged my phone at him, and he couldn't figure it out because it was an Android, not an iPhone. Yeah, he's like, I can't. And I'm like trying to tell him, and I'm just, starting to get more and more mad. And finally, the trainee was like, I've got it. And so she dialed for me. And this is probably one of the funnier things that my wife will tell you of the whole experience. I call, and I get her voicemail. And later found out she had been out, kind of doing some shopping after work. And I left her a message, and I was like, hey, it's me. Was in a little bit of an accident. My arm might be broken. Wait, no, it's definitely broken. Yeah, it's definitely broken. So they're taking me to X hospital downtown. So that's where I'm going. Bye. Like, it was just, it's and I'm expecting that the sirens are going to be on, and the the whole dramatic. Nope. It was like 3 o'clock, 3:30 traffic, which traffic here in Austin is really bad all the time. And no sirens, no nothing. It was just like as if I were driving myself.
So that would be the really traumatic experience, and the traffic crash.
Yeah, the entire thing was just, I saw my car as they were loading me into the ambulance, and it looked bad, but I was only seeing it from a certain angle. And so I was like, well, yeah, it sucks, but like, it can't be that bad, And once they got me there, they got me into the, the trauma unit. They were at that point then like, trying to x-ray me, and it took me a while to like let go of my shoulder and let them, move my arm around, because they had to place my arm over my head behind me while I was on the table to x-ray it. And so they're like, this is not going to feel good, but we have to do this. And they're like, they cut my shirt off of me. They took my boots off. They wanted to know how to take out, my nose ring and my lip ring and dermal piercing by my eye. And I'm like, forget it. That stuff's not coming off. They wanted to cut off my wedding ring. And I was like, nope, no. I was like, do what you got to do, pull it off. Like, it can't be any worse than this broken arm. And they were like, okay. So they x-ray me. And pretty much within, I'd say 10 minutes of being at the hospital, I was on my way to surgery. Because as it happened, both of the bones in my right forearm were broken, and it was a compound fracture, so it punctured the skin in a couple of places. I just was fortunate enough to have those arm warmers on and didn't see it. So they were like, we've got to get you into surgery, like now. We have to fix this. And I'm like, still, you have to call my wife, you have to, and I'm starting to almost get mad because I'm so worried about going under, and then what if something happens? And, as they are like wheeling me into the OR, I got her on the phone, and I was like, they're wheeling me into surgery, here, talk to the nurse. And I handed off my phone, and I was out. And I was out for a few hours while they put my arm back together. 2 plates, 7 screws in each plate. So I've got 2 plates and 14 screws in my right arm. They're still there. They have no plans to take them out. But they had to like get in there and, do their thing. And they wheeled me out, got me to a room, and they were like, okay, the good news is we got you back together. We got your arm. You're okay. But we have to take you back into surgery tomorrow morning because your ankle is also broken. And I'm like, wow, what? And they were like, yeah, there's a little bit of a fracture in your ankle. So we need to get in there tomorrow morning, and we need to put some screws in there to get that back together. And I was like, okay.
And that was how you became the Bionic Man.
And that was, I was like, as if I weren't metal enough, I had to go and have some put in my body. And so they did that the next day. And, then at that point, it just becomes coordinating insurances and what happened. And ultimately what wound up happening, what we found out, is that the driver of the truck that hit me had a diabetic episode, and he passed out at the wheel. I actually have, I'm going to see if I can just sort of summarize a little bit, but I have the traffic report, and in total, there were 6 vehicles involved. Mine was number 3. Mine was also the worst of it because I was in the middle. And what happened was the guy driving the truck passed out from his diabetic episode, crossed over into the southbound lane, and basically ping-ponged off of the streetlights. There were these utility poles, and he hit them and bounced off of them back into traffic. So had he not bounced off of those, he probably would have just wound up in that fence. But he was sent back into traffic. He hit the second car, bounced off of that car, and into me. So from my understanding and from looking at the diagram, it actually kind of softened the blow that he hit the second car, because if he would have hit me instead, he would have hit me full force, but that, I guess, kind of slowed him down a little bit.
Yeah, it gave you a little bit of a buffer, took some of his momentum away.
Everyone behind me, it was just, swerving to avoid fender benders, and I think the last vehicle just got hit by some of the debris, but of everybody, he and I were the only 2 that were actually taken to the hospital via ambulance. I later found out that he was completely fine. No injuries, no bruising, no nothing. He also apparently was like 4 doors down the hall from me in the hospital. um, and I came out of surgery. This happened on a Thursday. Friday morning, I came out of surgery for my ankle, and within the hour, they had me up and walking around. I had a boot, those big boots on, and a walker because my arm was broken. I had no cast or anything. I was expecting there would be a cast, or I don't know how that worked, but they were like, nope, those plates are going to hold everything together just fine. It was a very odd walker with like a arm rest, and they had me up and moving, and like I was in the hospital for 2 days.
Wow.
And they sent me home, and we're like, okay, physical therapy. And like 10 days later, I had to go back to the surgeon that had put me together, and they took out my stitches. And that actually was the first time I saw the x-rays. He took my phone and took pictures of the x-rays, and I could actually see like that,
the plates and the breaks and everything.
Yeah, it was all pre and post, and like, yeah, you could see the breaks, and I'm like, that's not right. The human arm should not look like that. It was so strange. And then it was like, suddenly I'm at home, and I'm laid up in the bed. I can't work. Work wouldn't even let me work from home. Like, I just was there. And so you're sitting there just, thinking about it. You're answering messages from people, but you're like, I can't do anything. I'm just sitting here, just trying to process all of this. And that, I guess it happened on Thursday. I came home Saturday night. Monday, which was also my wife's birthday, and I felt terrible because there I was, and she's having to take care of me.
Right.
And she went to the junkyard to get whatever she could find that was still in my car. And she was there and called me and was like, "Are you sure this is the right place?" I said, "Yeah, absolutely. That's the address." She's like, I can't see it. She's like, "I've been walking up and down this, this row where they said it is. I can't see it." I'm like, "Are you sure?" And then she turned around and went, "Wait a minute. There it is." I was like, "How do you, it was purple." She was like, "No, it's not, sweetie. It's not purple anymore."
Yeah.
They're like, they hit you so hard. It was like gray. The paint had come off. It was like down to primer. Like, and she's like, do you want to see pictures?" And I was like, yeah, because I'm sitting there thinking, I didn't pass out. I was fine. I've been through stuff. I've had, my father passed away when I was 12. I've had various relatives pass away. Like, I'm like, I'll be fine. Like, I can handle it. And my phone starts blowing up with the pictures that she's sending, and like, that was the moment. That was the traumatic moment where it hit me again, of what happened, because I'm actually looking at the car from every angle, not just
the one you saw as they were stretching you off. Yeah.
I saw it, and I texted her back, and I was like, "Hey, I know I asked for it. I know I said to send them, but I can't. Don't send anymore, please."
Okay, you can stop. Yeah.
I was like, "You can stop." And I just kept looking at them, and I'm like, what the hell? Like, what? How? Like,
so you had your experience now. You're out of the hospital, and you've finally seen the pictures, and you realize just how bad it was. When did you start having the feeling that things weren't right? Like, when, because you basically told me that sometimes you have the feeling that you didn't survive the crash. When did those start? Like, when did that feeling start? Like, that's what I'm interested in.
Yeah, I've got all the juicy details. I've told it. Yeah, I've told it so many times. I'm like, yeah. I honestly, I think the very first time that I was like, something is just off, was probably a week or two later, uh, my my wife, bless her, was taking care of me nonstop, also working a very demanding job at crazy hours. It's also holidays, and you know, she'd come home one night. She'd come home, and we had dinner, and she just looked so tired. And I was like, "Sweetie, just go to bed. Like, I'll be okay." I was sitting in the dining room, and I was like, "I'll be okay. Like, I can get to bed. Just go on and go to sleep." She was like, "Okay." So she went to bed, and I was just sitting there, and the house is quiet. All of our pets are asleep, and I'm like looking down at my arm. I had my stitches out at that point. I'm just like looking at my arm, and I'm like, I didn't feel like I was there. I'm sitting there, and I'm in my body, and I'm looking at these scars, and my knuckles and everything are all cut up, but I'm like, I don't feel like I'm here. I don't feel like I'm seeing this. It wasn't an out of body sort of thing. It was just, I'm in my body, but I'm like, this isn't right. Like, I don't, this is so bizarre, and it was a strange feeling. And then I think maybe the next day, um, my mother was really worried and had gone like online and found the traffic report. And she's like, "Hey, have you seen this?" And I was like, "No." She's like, "Well, I'll send it to you if you want." I was like, "Sure." So she sends it to me. I was in bed. I'm reading all of the details, and I look at the diagram. And it's very simple drawing, and I'm like looking at it. I'm like, that was me. This little dot labeled Unit 3. That was me. Among all of these other cars, nobody else was hurt. The guy that hit me head on ultimately was able to walk away once he came to. Like, this doesn't feel right. Something is just so off about this. It was so, like, at the time, it was just so hard to explain. And that was like the first moment when I saw the diagram. That's when I actually like broke down and was like, sobbing, very quietly. But I'm like sitting there just like, what the hell? Like, what just happened to me?
Yeah.
And, I didn't think about it a lot after that. After those first couple instances of just feeling like I shouldn't have survived that, I didn't really think about it. I kept.
I know you said you didn't feel like you were yourself. Did you feel like displaced, or is there a way to describe it that you can put into words, I guess?
Yeah. So I had physical therapy afterwards, and you're kind of like trying to get back into the swing of life at that point. Trying to learn how to move and navigate. And you're almost not letting yourself think about that sort of stuff. People who've been through trauma, often don't want to deal with it right when it happens, and
can't process it immediately.
It's so hard to like process it right away. And sometimes people have those repressed memories, and there's so many different factors. But it's like I was so focused on just trying to take this burden that I felt like I was at the time off my wife and coworkers, and people carting me around. And then of course when I go back to work, I'm having to ride in the car past that same spot every day, and there's still pieces of metal, and there's still dented light poles, and there's still obvious signs of it. And I'm passing by it every day because there was no other way around it. Like freaking out and kind of shuddering and just like, and once I was like kind of up and moving and kind of going like, okay, it's I think I can probably start trying to figure out what this weird feeling is I'm having. My grandmother passed away, and so my mind starts focusing on that, and like it's like I just kept putting it off and like not dealing with it. And finally, I honestly don't remember where I was, but I remember this feeling of like, the best way for me to describe it is like this. You go to a 3D movie and you've got your glasses on and you see everything. It's all completely clear. you're looking at the screen and you see what's happening, and something may happen, whatever. You take your glasses off for a moment and you look at the screen, and you can see everything. It's there. It's continuing. It's moving, but it's not lined up. It's like it's off center just a little bit. Everything
Shifted
is just
slightly off.
everything is just shifted just to one side, like not so much that you're like, oh, I'm, spinning out of control, or I'm, losing my mind or whatever. You're just like, this is not right. Something about this moment shouldn't be like this. This isn't happening correctly. And I did, because anytime I mention this, someone's like, have you seen a therapist? Yes, I have a therapist. We talk about it, regularly. And I tried to explain it to her. And this is where it kind of shifts over to that moment where you're like, okay, maybe I should tell somebody. Maybe I should say this out loud to somebody that maybe can say, oh yeah, you know what? It's, survivor's guilt, or it's, PTSD, or it's whatever.
Yeah, we have a name for it, so this is what you're experiencing.
Exactly. And so that was kind of my hope, that like once I was at that point where I was like, you know what, I can talk about this, and hopefully someone else can help me make sense of it. And my therapist at the time, I mentioned it, and she was like, well, yeah, that is common. There's some support groups and things like that. I've tried, and it's so strange, because when you can't put something into words to explain just this feeling that everything is off and it's not aligned as it should be, trying to type that into Google or whatever, like it's so hard to do. And then as you start telling friends, like, almost jokingly, you're like, man, maybe I just didn't survive that, and they're like, well, then what does that mean for me? And I'm like, I don't want to be a jerk, but it's not about you right now. It's about this like completely bizarre feeling that I cannot put into words. And I'm just trying to I'm just grasping, at this point. And
well, it's I had an idea about this when you first told me, and I think you had mentioned it as well, but like the alternate reality theory.
mm-hmm.
And so there is a theory out there, and I don't know the name of it or who even came up with it, but basically, there's an infinite number of our worlds where an infinite number of tiny little differences have occurred. And so what if your crash was one of those differences? In one world, you survived. This world, you're here, you're alive, but in another one, you didn't. And maybe there's bleed over between those worlds at times. And because it's a very traumatic experience, something that's very personal to you, like maybe that's part of what's causing the weird shift. I mean, in a completely like pseudoscience sci-fi sense of the word, but trauma's weird, man. Trauma affects everyone just slightly differently.
It is. Yeah. It's so, it's so bizarre. And like I said, you tell people, and their reaction is, well, what does that make me? Am I a ghost? And I'm like, no, I'm not worried about you right now. I'm trying to figure out, what the hell happened? What is going on? And I have a very good friend. I've known him for a long time. And several years ago, years prior to my accident, he was in a very, very bad car accident. Without going into details, it kind of makes mine look like a fender bender, honestly. And, I think at some point I had posted, on Facebook, as like the memory of the accident came up, and I posted and was like, hey, I'm still here, everybody. And yeah, I think I made a comment to something to the effect of, glad I survived this, or did I? And he messaged me and was like, hey, I know it's really hard to explain, but I know what you mean. I get it. I completely understand what you're saying, and I know how you're feeling. It's so bizarre, right? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. it's such, this mind F, like it's so weird when you can't explain it, and it's, tip of your tongue trying to remember, a word. And he's like, it's happened to me so many times. It's so strange, but yeah, he's like, I get it. He's like, you have these moments where you almost pull yourself out of them. And, you're maybe at dinner with your friends, or you're at a show, or just, sitting on the couch with your spouse, and you go, this doesn't feel right. There's nothing wrong. No one's hurt. Nothing's burning. Nothing's happening. But there's something in this moment right now that's missing, that I can't explain. But it's like
Can't
this
put words to it.
And that's the hardest part about it, is trying to. But it's like, it's almost like, this sounds so crazy, but it's like someone is missing. And that's kind of how it feels. It's like I'm there, but this version of me shouldn't be here. This version of me should be somewhere else. And, in looking back at various moments in my life where something, traumatic has occurred, it makes a little bit more sense to me. These weird possibilities of, alternate universes and timelines. And, I, even now, but before my accident, I looked at my life in two different periods. There was, from as far back as I could remember when I was born up until I was 12 years old, and my dad passed away. And that was like the first block of my life. And then there was everything after that. And at that point, it was almost like everything from the time after my dad passed away to my accident. And I'm like, has something happened? Did something happen back then when I was 12, and that branched off, this other, timeline?
Yeah.
And then from there, I just continued on until the accident. And then at that point, it's, I'm now in another one. Am I just hopping into these weird timelines? Am I dying there and moving on here? Is this, this weird in between sort of purgatory? And the other things, I guess, that happen sort of along the way. Kind of rambling, but
no, man, it's this is good. It's good for you to talk about it, and it's an interesting topic that I don't think a lot of people address after trauma, and how putting a name to something, and feeling like you're not there and feeling like you are, and then
since, I mean, when I was a kid, I was terrified of everything. I was terrified of the dark. I was terrified of, the Michael Jackson Thriller video. Like, I was scared of everything. You name it, I was scared of it. I was watching an old home movie of me on like my 3rd birthday, opening the Masters of the Universe Beastman figure. And it's like, the minute I saw his face, I threw it down and ran because I was terrified. And it's scared of everything. And, of course, then I get older, and, after my dad passed, I kind of became, more like very typical angsty, moody, gothy teenager, and never quite grew out of the gothy part. I'm not as angsty anymore, but, just started getting into like, spookier things, and the looks, and all of that kind of stuff, just kind of kept that going. Well, I guess it was in the year leading up to the truck accident. I've always been I've always liked crows, the birds. I like the movie; it's my favorite movie. But just the birds themselves, I've always just liked. Big black gothy bird.
Yeah.
And
with a lot of historical and mythical relevance to it, messengers of the dead, knowledge from what were the birds for Odin? Nori and Nod. I can't remember, but he had two crows that
Yeah.
were knowledge and wisdom or something. I forget. But yes,
Mhm.
crows. Sorry.
So I have, I mean, you can sort of see since we're on video, but I have two on my
Oh,
chest.
yeah, huge chest. Collarbone.
Yeah, it goes shoulder to shoulder. I have two that I covered up. Made a real stupid tattoo decision at one point and covered it up with these two very large crows on my chest. You know, their wings cross over like right in the center. You know, my wife and I started dating, and she's very much in touch with you know, witchcraft, the universe, and you know, a lot of things. I learned a lot of stuff from her, and she was talking about it. She was like, well, yeah, I mean, that's your, you know, your spirit animal, your spirit guide. And I was like, spirit animal? Yeah, I mean, yeah, they're cool. But she was like, no, she's like, trust me, it's a thing. Well, about a year before that first accident, I started seeing them. Don't think I had ever really seen any around before, but they started showing up. Namely, the two that I remember most was the office that I worked in. I had a seat, my desk was right next to a window, and I happened to just look out the window one day, and there was a very large crow perched on the railing just outside my window, probably 10 feet away, but on the other side of the glass. And it was like right there. And I was like, what the hell? I'm like looking around to see if anyone else around me sees it.
Yeah.
And, you know, everyone was like on a break or on the phone, that no one's paying attention. And I'm like, it's right there. And I no joke, I look at it and it starts cawing and like making a ruckus, but it's like facing me. And I'm like, what the, you know? And so I texted my wife and I'm like, hey, there's this crow like right outside. She's like, well, probably has something to say to you. And I was like, oh, okay. And I went outside, and it kind of looked at me, cawed a couple of times, and flew away. It's like, that was weird, right? And then probably 6 months later, I had moved desks, but I could still see out the window. And I just happened to look out the window, and I don't know if it was the same one. I'm not sure, but it was perched on a fence directly in front of my car, just sitting there. Wasn't doing anything, it was just looking around, but it was sitting in front of my car. Yeah, there's this entire, you know, row of parking spots, all full, but it's in front of my car, just sitting there. I'm like, this is really strange. This, like, what is happening, you know? And then I'd ride my bike to and from work, and I just started seeing them more regularly. I was like, this is just an odd sign. Like, it's just a really weird thing that they're here and around. And, you know, you start looking at various articles and, you know, talking about, you know, them being spirit guides and, you know, being mediators between life and death and you know, being supernatural creatures that communicate with humans. And I'm like, this is kind of reinforcing this strange feeling of like, you know, being sort of in between worlds, I guess.
Am I alive,
you know,
or am I dead? And
I'm like, they're here and they're, you know, showing up more regularly, but this is really strange. Well, then during my recovery, I was at home. At the time we had 4 cats. We have 5 now, but we had 4 cats, and one of our cats, Sophie, a little gray cat, she was my wife's cat before we got together, but she tolerated me. She'd be around me. You know, we'd say hi, I'd pet her, but more particularly close. And during my recovery, she just attached herself to me. She became my little, just latched onto me, just became my little gray shadow. And like to this day, like literally as we're talking now, she is in a bed next to my desk. It's a coffin-shaped bed that I built for her. And
was that whose head I saw in the bottom corner? Yes. For a moment ago? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And she like she's with me everywhere. If I'm out of the room for too long, like there's this like sort of panicked, worried look on her face. And she starts looking around for me. And if I'm gone too long, she'll start running around the house and shouting. It almost sounds like she's yelling, help, help, because she doesn't know where I am. And I'll call for her. I'm like, Sophie, try to call her into whatever room I'm in. But she won't come to me unless I get up and she physically makes eye contact with me. And then at that point, she calms down and I'll scoop her up and hug and kiss her. But every night she's curled up right next, likes to spoon with me all throughout my workday. She sits right next to me. And if she wants to get up and leave, she'll sit on the edge of the table and wait until I lean over and, kiss her on the head. And then she'll go about her business. It's like she wants me to kiss her and say, it's okay, you can go now. But then she'll come right back. And, in thinking about these birds and these crows that I'm seeing everywhere, and then going, the Egyptians had such strong connections with cats.
Yeah. Also,
and they were said to see spirits and be able to, be that link between them. And I'm like, this is just reinforcing this feeling that I have that, she knows. Granted, of all the cats, she was the only one that just latched onto me like she did. She's my best little cat friend, but it's, it's just there. It just doesn't do much to sort of be like, no, I'm being crazy. It's like, no, it's something is off. Something is weird.
It's reinforcing your idea. So now we have two theories. We've got the fractal multiverse. Perhaps you're in a version of yourself that you're not supposed to be somehow. And then we've got maybe just that connection between the dead. Maybe something happened, you crossed over, but you're still in your body and you're still moving. So
yeah, it's so strange. Like it's, you try to just be like, what in this moment is missing? Like, I'm not unhappy. I'm not sad or whatever. I'm just it's like this moment shouldn't be happening to me. Somebody else should be here experiencing this. That's not me.
You're not completely present almost.
Yeah, it's it's weird. And we had talked about a little bit, the what you call it, the Darko effect.
Yeah, just trying to put a word to it, but yeah, like the Donnie Darko effect. And then another one I read, which again was another movie, was the glass door, the sliding glass door effect. There's an old movie called Sliding Doors, and the whole point is this woman makes one decision, and you see how that one decision, which seemingly was meaningless, fractaled out into these two completely different stories. And that when, like you said, trying to research something like this, it's impossible. You get the weirdest things that come up. But those were the two things that kept popping up for me: Donnie Darko and then Sliding Doors. And
I'll have to go back, and I haven't seen Sliding Doors in a while, but I actually just watched Donnie Darko just last Friday with my daughter. She's almost 15, and she's
you're making me feel
turn into it's telling me she'll be 15 in a few weeks, and she's almost surpassed me in the spooky weirdo category. It's actually really surprising. But we watched the Crow several months ago, and she's like, she loves that movie so much. And then we watched Donnie Darko the other night, and she's like, that's a good movie. She's like, that's weird. And I was like, yeah. She's like, I almost don't understand. And I'm like, I haven't really like talked to her about this weird vibe. I don't want to freak her out, but trying to explain like, he's living in this timeline, and then it branches off and he's living an entirely separate life, but he knows he's got to end it, otherwise the actual time that he's from could very well implode. I was like, it's weird,
and it's really definitely hard to explain it when it's when you don't even fully understand it yourself. Like, I don't know how many times I've watched that movie and it still doesn't all fit together.
When I was trying to find, apparently there's like a companion website that came out when the movie was released, like on DVD, that explained a lot more. And I didn't really get it until the other night. I was like, pulled some of it up. I was like, okay, I was like, that definitely makes a lot more sense. But it that was kind of the best way to sort of explain it. These weird feelings. It's like, okay, maybe I died in that accident, and the, you know, actual, shattering of everything sort of shattered that point in time. And, I've now moved on to this other thing. Of course, then the Loki series comes out, and there's, multiverse timelines, and you're just like, oh my God, this is making my brain hurt so much trying to figure it out. So, if anything, hopefully if somebody listening out there has sort of had that same, experience or whatever, like, I would love for somebody else to be like, yes, I know exactly what you mean. It's so bizarre, isn't it? I'm like, yeah, because, thus far I've had one person, and like I said, he's doing great now, but, he went through some serious stuff, with his accident. And,
yeah,
once he reached out to me to be like, dude, I get it. You're not crazy. I know you sound crazy to everyone else, but I get it. And I'm like, okay, one person gets it, and that's enough for me. I'm just gonna keep living on in this timeline, I suppose. And
I'm glad you are, because that would bum me out. If I found out that for the last last few years, you hadn't been with us. So
whatever universe I'm in, I'm glad to be in it here with you and everyone else.
There we go. Well, if you start seeing weird spatial time tubes leading you places like in Donnie Darko, maybe don't follow them. I don't know. Or at least let me know.
Yeah, I don't plan to, but I'll have to ask my wife about that. She's, you'll have to talk to her. She has seen some stuff and knows some stuff, and like, it's nuts. So yeah, for sure.
Definitely keep that in mind. So, well, man, I'm gonna. We just did a long session here, so that'll be good, I think. And I really appreciate you coming on and talking about your experiences, man.
Thank you so much. Sorry, I tend to ramble, but
no,
is good. Hopefully people out there, maybe somebody knows something. They're like, yeah, it's this, and great. Let Sir Billiam know, and he can pass it along to me, or find me wherever out there, and be like, hey, dude, I found this, and that it would be nice to be able to make a lot more sense of it than
absolutely
I attempt to.
And if you guys do know what we're talking about and what Chris is feeling, or you've gone through it yourself, you can drop me an email at tfdr.podcast@gmail.com. Or I just created a Facebook page for the podcast. You can actually message me directly there, and you can tell me about your experience. Or if you want me to pass something on to Chris, I can do that from either of those two places. So let us know, or leave a comment below. Let us know, what kind of weird experiences you've had with it, or if you even know the name of it, if there's like some weird clinical science name for it. For now, we're just kind of leaning on either the Darko effect or the glass doors moments. So, help us decide what it's called, I guess. So, but all right, man. Well, again, I really appreciate you coming on.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on, man. I appreciate it.
All right, man. Well, guys, thanks for listening and experiencing another dark roast with me. I hope you enjoyed the episode, and let us know in the comments below if you've ever had a shift in your own reality that left you feeling slightly displaced. Also, if you want to share your story but maybe don't want to come on the show directly, you can email me at tfdr.podcast@gmail.com, letting me know all about your experience. Remember, you can find the show on most major platforms: YouTube, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Instagram, and like I said, recently created a Facebook page, so feel free to message me there at any time. Just search for Tales from the Dark Roast. Wherever you're listening, leave us a comment, review, or just hit the like button if you're enjoying the Dark Roast. Thank you for listening, and if you have a dark story you're willing to tell, then I have a pot of dark coffee I'm willing to share. I'm William, and this has been Tales from the Dark Roast.